Ready to proceed?
One brief housekeeping matter, Your Honor. When we put in the disc yesterday, which for the record is State's Exhibit 552, I provided the court reporter with one that was a shortened one. We actually put in the full one, so I'm going to replace 552 with the full disc with the consent of defense counsel.
We consent, Your Honor.
Okay, very well.
With that, State's ready to proceed, Your Honor.
Defense ready to proceed, Your Honor.
May bring the jury. Very good. Good morning. All right, day number 20, cross-examination. You may proceed.
Court, Your Honor. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Good morning. So let's see if we can do this quickly. Is that okay with you? It is Friday. Monday's a holiday. So let's see if we can't get through this. You are is it senior special agent?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And you investigated, your charge was investigating the so-called roadside shooting, correct?
Correct.
And as part of that, you, after Alec was airlifted to Savannah Hospital, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And did you go see him there?
Yes.
And did you talk to the doctors about his condition?
We made contact with medical staff there. I don't know if I specifically spoke to a particular doctor, but we made contact with the medical staff that were providing treatment.
So, did the medical staff tell you he had a shallow sort of trough wound in the back of his head, apparently caused by a bullet? Did they tell you that?
They did not.
Did they tell you he had a fractured skull?
They did not.
Did you look at his, have you subpoenaed his medical records?
We have, but at the time of my arrival, the tests were ongoing, and that those documents weren't readily available to me.
But you've looked at him since then?
Since then.
So you would agree with me he had a fractured skull, a wound, a trough wound in the back of his head?
I'd agree that's what the medical records state.
Let me see if you can identify this.
These appear to be a portion of Mr. Murdaugh's medical records.
I understand, it's a portion.
Yes, sir.
But it's the sort of the summarizing portion, is it not?
Yes, sir, it is.
Okay. I think you furnished these to us. Do you have any objection?
Objection, Rule 801.
Well, Well, let me ask you this question. Maybe this will make it easy. Who subpoenaed and got these records? Did Sweat?
Yes, at the time of the incident, they weren't discussing his medical condition with us. I mean, we were able to, due to HEPA, they weren't readily providing us access to his medical records or consultation with his doctors. We had a general understanding based on what Mr. Murdaugh told us or told deputies on the side of the road and based what he stated on 911 that he had been shot in the head. So when we arrived and we saw a subsequent injury.
Just let me cut to the chase here. Did y'all subpoena the medical records?
Yes, we did.
Are these a portion of the medical records, the business records that you received from the hospital in Savannah, the Memorial Health?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Does that resolve that issue? Business records? And for the record, I don't redacted any personal identifying matters. That's what's redacted.
With redactions, no objection.
Admitted without objection.
It's and that's number 124. So let me have you, if this will refresh your memory, look at page 1, what the medical staff says are his injuries.
Yes, sir.
Okay, now, I could have you read that. Do you understand what it means?
I have a general, like I said, I'm not a doctor, I'm a SLED agent, so I have a general understanding of the terms on the
Did he have
page.
does it indicate he had a furrow wound in his head?
I'm not trying to play coy, it just says, I could read it, if it says,
Okay, let me publish part to you and see what you think. Left posterior peritoneal subdural hematoma with adjacent blood products. What do you think that means? What's a subdural hematoma?
obviously, it's a bleeding on the subdural part of his head, so it's.
So it'd be a brain bleed?
Absolutely, yes.
Okay. It says linear left posterior peritoneal bone fracture. That would be a fractured skull.
Yes.
Okay. Scalp laceration overlying the left peritoneal bone. That would be that furrow I'm talking about, right?
If that's what you infer to, I'm not a doctor. I mean, a furrow is, it's. I
It's
can
a
only
laceration.
testify what it states on the
Okay.
page.
And attending radiologist reviewed all the images and agrees with the interpretation. So radiologist looked and saw brain bleed, saw a subdural hematoma, saw a fractured skull, and made findings consistent with a bullet wound to the head. Did they not?
The medical professionals reviewed his charts and his tests. They came to that opinion. We refer to them as it relates to their findings.
I'm sorry, refer to them what?
We refer to them as it relates to their findings. If that's what they
Okay.
determined happened,
Okay.
we refer to them.
So he had real injuries.
There was a laceration on the back of his head that was consistent with a gunshot wound.
Fractured skull, subdural, brain bleed, right?
If that's what the records say, then yes.
Have you ever told anybody that, specifically the Maggie's sister and her husband, that Alec had been shot in the head? I mean, I can play it for you. You recorded it.
Oh, absolutely. If it's, I'm not denying that I've done it. I don't remember off the top of my head.
I just want to make sure you've told somebody that Alec got shot in the head.
Yes, I've never questioned
Okay.
that Alec's been shot in the head.
Okay, I'm just trying to.
Okay,
We're having a difficult time here communicating this morning. I don't quite understand it. The
It's
simple
early.
question was he shot in the head? And you see, I'm not sure until just now you said yes, he was shot in the head.
I apologize. Yes, he
So
was
we
shot in
agree
the head.
on that. He's shot in the head.
Yes.
Okay. And he was in intensive care for a while, and then he was let out relatively quickly. Isn't that right?
Yes, I believe he was released on the 7th.
Okay. Now, I'd like to show you Defense Exhibit 125 and 127.
No objection, Your Honor.
Now, these, let me show these to you so you can identify them. Are these photographs consistent with what you saw Alex Murdaugh at the hospital?
No, this first photograph was photographed by Hampton County EMS.
Okay.
So prior to my arrival, this was taken. When I arrived in Savannah, Alex was not in this condition.
But you would represent that these
This
were...
image is something that I saw at the hospital. I didn't see this.
Okay. So, this was taken by who? Hampton County?
I don't know who took the photo, but it was included with the Hampton County EMS records that we obtained.
Okay. So, did I offer these?
No objection, Your Honor.
Okay. So let's look at, do I have to go to the Elmo, or do you have these? Okay. I like the bandage head first. Okay. Okay, so this is the photo you indicate some other law enforcement agency took before he went to, that's at the side of the road, or do you know?
This photo was included in the records from Hampton County EMS that we obtained at the time that he provided the recorded statement inside the ambulance, where he
Okay.
gave the detailed description of what happened to him.
Which we've listened to.
Yes, yesterday. So at some point, his wound was treated, and he was placed in a cervical collar outside my presence. I wasn't present when he was transported. I didn't meet with Mr. Murdaugh until I went to
Okay.
Savannah.
Put the next picture on. And who took this picture?
This picture was, I did not take any pictures, so I believe it may have been, it was Agent Rebecca Gregg who was accompanying me to Savannah.
And is that an accurate depiction of what his skull looked like at the hospital?
Correct.
And you notice blood there?
Yes.
Okay. Go ahead and kill the Elmo, please. Now, as I understand it, after he was released from the hospital, he went to detox in Atlanta.
That's what y'all told us, yes.
I'm sorry?
That's what you told me.
Okay. And we called you from a facility in Atlanta to give the statement we saw earlier, correct?
You called me from a telephone. I don't know exactly what your location. I wasn't there with you, so I don't know where you called me from.
You're telling me SLED can't tell where a phone is?
Mr. Harpootlian.
I mean, if you're going to tell me that SLED can't tell us where a phone is,
Pose the question, you must give him an opportunity to answer.
I apologize.
Mr. Harpootlian, you called me. I don't know what number you called me from.
My cell phone.
Okay, so you called me from your cell phone. I have that number, so it identified as yours.
Right.
But I don't know where you were at. You told me that you were calling from Atlanta. I took you at your word, but I can't testify to where you were calling me from because I don't know.
Did you ever subpoena his detox records?
We made an attempt, but we had issues with them honoring an out-of-state subpoena.
Well, I mean, you can go to a court in Georgia and make them honor it, or we could have given you consent. Did you ask us for consent?
No consent was given.
No consent was asked for.
No
Right.
no consent was asked, no consent was given. So
Okay. But we represented on that call that he was in a detox facility before, when we called you to set up the call in Atlanta, and he was now, and I think we've said on the recording, that the doctors indicate he's coherent, he's been through the detox, which is a pretty tough process, and he was willing to talk to you once he was competent to do so. Isn't that correct?
that's the information you relayed to me, yes.
Okay. Do you have any reason to doubt that?
No, sir.
Okay. And so as soon as he came out of the initial stages of detox, you don't know this, but we went down, we called you.
Mr. Harpootlian, you can't testify.
Who called who initially to set that call up?
I called you on the day of September 7th to reach out to let you know that we had some developments in the case, and I told you that we wanted to speak to Alex.
Okay.
You told us that he was in rehab or was en route to rehab, and we would try to make some arrangements. We had initially discussed agents traveling to whatever facility Mr. Murdaugh was in to meet with him in an attempt to get a statement. That meeting did not materialize. On the afternoon of the 13th, you called me from your cell phone to set up a telephone interview. Given the complexity of the case and the fluid movements of the investigation, we wanted to, agree to that so we could get some type of, at that point, Mr. Murdaugh had, obviously, the story that he told us was not true, and we wanted to take that as an opportunity to try to make some sense out of the investigation, given that you and Mr. Griffith were there saying he was ready to tell us really what happened.
So he, through his attorneys, reached out to you to give this recorded statement we saw.
On the 13th, you called me, yes.
Right. And secondly, he admitted that he had stolen money, right?
Yes.
He admitted drug use,
Yes.
and he admitted that he'd lied, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And as a result of that statement, he was charged with insurance fraud, conspiracy to commit insurance fraud, and filing a false police report. Is that correct?
Yes, he was.
And by that time, he had moved from the detox facility in Atlanta to a rehab facility in Orlando, correct?
Correct.
And you asked that he surrender himself, and he did that, did he not?
Yes, he did.
He had his son Buster drive him from Orlando to Hampton County, and I believe you all met him and, by prearrangement, him and Buster at his mother's house.
The agreement was for us to meet you and Mr. Griffith with Mr. Murdaugh, that no stops be taken from Orlando to Hampton. We encountered Mr. Murdaugh and Buster pulling into the driveway of the Almeda property. So outside of our agreement, so Mr. Murdaugh was taken into custody as soon as he arrived at Almeda.
Well, so perhaps if we weren't going to Orlando, stopping to get his lawyers before he surrendered himself would have been a violation of our agreement?
No, our agreement was that Mr. Murdaugh was to go from Orlando directly to your custody. Buster, I don't fault Buster. I don't think that he was doing anything that he thought was wrong. He was just listening to instructions. But, we were supposed to meet him with you, and he showed up at his mom's house, so he was placed under arrest at his mom's house.
Well, we showed up at Mom's house as y'all were taking him away, right?
After he was arrested, yes.
Right, but, we were there minutes after you arrested him, right?
Well, yes, because they called you, so, and I think I might have called you to tell you that we were arresting him as well.
Right. He went to a bond hearing,
Yes, he did.
and he was granted bond,
Yes.
and one of the conditions of the bond allowed him to go back to Orlando to rehab, right?
Yes.
And he went back to Orlando to rehab
Yes.
until he was indicted on the financial fraud charges.
Yes.
And his cooperation, when I say cooperation, the statements he made I understand you were only investigating the roadside shooting, right?
Correct.
So you weren't investigating the murder, you weren't investigating, I'm talking about Maggie and Paul's murders, you weren't investigating the financial crimes, only the roadside shooting, correct?
Are you referring during my interviews with the 3 interviews with Mr. Murdaugh?
I'm sorry?
Are you referring to, in the 3 interviews with Mr. Murdaugh, the first 2 interviews were conducted with him being considered the victim of a violent crime.
Right,
And in the 3rd interview, you set parameters as his attorney as to what information we would discuss on the call.
I'm not, but he did, when you asked questions about his bank accounts, he cooperated fully with you, right?
After some give and take, I think between you and I, he disclosed information, yes.
Right, and he admitted to you he'd stolen money.
Yeah, he confirmed that he had stolen money, because at that point, we had been told by other parties he had stolen money, and on the 7th, we recovered enterprise banking slips. So we knew we had documentation he had stolen money. He just confirmed it with his.
Did you know whether he knew he was just coming out of detox? Certainly many many defendants would have never talked to you, correct?
Objection is sustained.
Did he have to talk to you?
Some of the best confessions I've ever got were from a defense attorney. So he spoke to me.
Not this defense attorney, okay?
Well, he still confessed on the call. So
I mean, there
you know,
are defense attorneys and defense attorneys, right? Okay. So let me say this. As a result of some of the information you got, did you give that statement that he gave you? Did you give that to who was investigating the financial crimes?
That was a joint operation out of our office. There were several agents that were involved.
But no agent in charge like Mr. Owens?
There was an agent, David Williams, Special Agent David Williams,
Okay.
myself, Special Agent Matt Wright. We've all had part in the financial investigations.
Okay, and as a result of his cooperation, partially, and what you already knew, you're aware that he was indicted on 90 indictments of financial fraud, which could result in life without parole for him. Do you not?
He was found.
If you'd answer yes or no and then explain your answer. Was he indicted on 90 charges of financial fraud and for which he faces life without parole? Is that correct? Just yes or no?
Objection is sustained.
I'm sorry, what was the objection?
There was an objection, and I sustained the objection.
I'm sorry, Your Honor, I don't understand the grounds for the objection.
401, Your Honor.
I'm sorry, I understand what 401 is. I don't know why it would apply to this.
Objection is sustained.
The information you got was voluntary about the financial piece of this was voluntary by him? No one threatened him? No one coerced him? He has two lawyers sitting there, right?
To the best of my knowledge, no one threatened him. I was not present with Mr. Murdaugh at the time of giving his statement. I wasn't. It was over the telephone. Based on what you've told us, no one threatened him. Y'all
Nobody
were
had
there
a gun to his
representing.
head.
I wasn't in the room. If you did, I can't speak to it.
Thank you, Agent. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Any redirect?
Briefly, Your Honor, may it please the court. When you interviewed the defendant, Alex Murdaugh, on September 4th, that was in the hospital, is that right?
Yes, it was.
Did he agree to speak to you?
Yes, he did.
Did he respond appropriately to your...
All right, Jack, we've already dealt with this matter, and if we're going to go into this, we'd like a Jackson v. Dino hearing as to his competence to talk to him in the hospital.
Mr.
He specifically cross-examined him on the injuries in the hospital that he had suffered, and I'm just following up with the agent about the circumstances generally of his interaction with Mr.
Gentlemen, we'll
Murdaugh.
have you go to the jury room for a break. Please do not discuss the case. Everyone, be seated, please. What's the nature of the objection again, Mr. Harpootlian?
Your Honor, there's several bases. One, that was a leading question, but if you get past that. Secondly, we had an agreement, which he complied with on direct examination, to have him say what happened there in summary fashion and not go into a quoting piece, even though we believe, and if you look at these medical records, he's showing positive for barbiturates and opioids, many of which were administered by the hospital. We believe the doctors will say he was not competent to give any sort of voluntary statement. And he was not advised of Miranda warnings. He wasn't in any way, obviously wasn't in custody, but we believe that we're entitled to a hearing on competence. And to do so, we're going to need the doctors from Savannah here.
Son of a bitch.